Welcome to Photoactive, a podcast about photography and technology. I'm Kirk McElhearn.
And I'm Jeff Carlson.
How are you today, Jeff?
I am doing great. It's a beautiful day in Seattle.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Spring has sprung and, I'm still in my house. Oh, we're all still in our houses.
We're all still home.
No, it's good. We've been talking about, coronavirus on our last two episodes now. But I have to say, at least being in Seattle, when we first brought this up, Seattle was like the hot spot in North America. And right now, fingers crossed, knock on wood, all of that, Seattle and California, we are now like the models because we've been doing the shelter in place for so long. And so the curve is flattening out. So, I like strangely optimistic, even though, all the talk about, oh, well, now everything's fine. Let's get back into regular normal. Like that's all garbage.
Yeah.
But, I think all things considered, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
Good. You've also got a new book out, and we're going to talk about that in the second half of the show, aren't we?
That's another reason why I'm great, because my book is out.
And you've even got another book coming out soon, but it's not a photography-related book. We'll talk about both of them later.
Yeah.
You're just like the book guy all of a sudden.
It's funny how these things overlap. I mean, literally one project had been in progress for over a year, and the other one was just over the last month or so. But it's work. It's good to be busy, and if there's stuff that I can release and people can read, that's great.
Okay, so this week we want to start by talking about using manual focus lenses on fancy modern cameras.
Yeah.
Now, we both use Fujifilm X-T3s, and we get Fujifilm lenses and we screw them on, and you press the little button a bit and it goes vroom, vroom, and it focuses, and boom, you're all set. But some people may want to choose to do this the old-fashioned way with a lens that doesn't have electronics in it and turn the thing by hand in order to get the focus. Now, of course, you can manually focus with an autofocus lens. You can just turn off the autofocus, or you can use a manual focus autofocus. So you press and hold the shutter, you autofocus, then you turn the focus ring to focus in or out a bit. And you may want to do this to focus on, say, a specific item, but then you want to pull back to get something else as your main focus. There are some reasons to do it.
Yeah.
I find it interesting. If I'm shooting flowers, for example, where you have a relatively large depth of field between the fronts of the petals and the pistils and the insides of the flowers, so the autofocus doesn't always get the spot that I want to have in focus. So there, I use autofocus and manual, or the flower photos that I shot last year in my office, all those photos against the black background, I did all those in manual focus because it was just easier. My camera was on a tripod. I didn't want to have to worry about deciding, so I would just look through and spin it. But, of course, I could have used cheaper lenses to do that, couldn't I?
You could have. Well, and also, most importantly, you did not have any wind in your office. That's
Yes.
the thing that always gets me with shooting flowers. Strangely enough, they're in the wild and there's wind and things move. And especially if you're trying to shoot manual focus, having things move, like you have to adapt to it. It's funny because I think, I'll have to defer to you for your historical knowledge because, autofocus, I think in photography is a fairly new thing. I mean, if we were shooting in the 1950s, and again, my history on these types of things is not nearly as good, but if you wanted to focus on things, of course, you had to manually focus everything. But nowadays, I come from the point of view where I expect good autofocus on my lenses, and I rely on it. And to think about like shooting on a manual focus lens, a manual only lens, seems counterintuitive to me. But there are certainly circumstances where that's either your only option, that's the affordable option, or one of the things we're going to talk about, that is kind of the hack together option.
Well, I think there are still some people who like it's kind of like listening to vinyl records. They want to
Yeah.
have that nostalgic feeling, so they turn off everything and they do it manually. And actually, it's a really good learning experience, I
Oh,
think.
totally.
When you're learning about focus, you're learning about depth of field, assuming you have a camera with a live view where you can see that, right?
Hmm.
It's really good to be able to see that difference. But the first autofocus camera, I don't know if you've looked this up. Do you remember when they date from?
I don't. I don't. That just popped into my head, and of course, it would have been good for me to think of that ahead of time.
Well, you see,
Do you
I've
have
looked
that
it
there?
up. I
See,
do.
there you go.
So the first autofocus single lens reflex camera was the Polaroid SX70 Sonar One Step, and that was 1978. Now that was the Polaroid SX70. When it came out in 1978, that was the big deal. The one with the sort of faux leather that folded up, and it was a huge thing back then. You would see them in New York, people outside with them, and it was kind of funny because it was a clunky looking thing. It had a weird shape, but it had a certain amount of popularity. And the shape of the pictures that came out, with the bottom that was taller, right? Because
Hmm.
that's where the chemicals were. And I remember I knew someone who had it, and you could do this really cool thing. If you rubbed your fingers on a picture while it was developing, you'd get these really funny blurs.
Oh,
One of Peter Gabriel's early albums has a cover that was done like that.
oh, interesting.
So it was like a technique that people played with. The Pentax MEF had focus sensors in the body and a motorized lens. So that was the first autofocus 35 millimeter SLR camera in 1981. Nikon released one in 1983, and then Minolta in 1985. So autofocus does go back quite a way. But I think it took a long, long, long time to be as precise and as flexible as it is now. I mean, we've got these things where it grabs someone's eyes and it follows them around.
Yeah,
You see these videos presenting autofocus, like someone doing a motorcycle on a racetrack and with the little squares. It's really quite amazing.
it is. It really is. And I think that's partially, the direction that I come to it, which is, all right, here I have this little computer in my hands and it's doing a lot of stuff for me. And so I don't really think about focus unless, it misses focus or I need to change my focus setting if I'm trying to do something more active or move the focus point, all of those things. And so to go from that, where I just sort of assume that the camera's going to be doing all this work for me, to deliberately shooting in manual, it's definitely a shift. But so the reason that we're bringing this up when we were talking about topics, I used to shoot on a Nikon D90, and I had, I want to say, 4 or 5 Nikon lenses. And when I decided to move over to mirrorless and go with Fuji, I eventually sold all of my lenses. We actually have an episode where we were talking about selling equipment. We'll link to that in the show notes. So I sold all my lenses except for one. I had bought a Tamron 28 to 75 millimeter macro lens. I don't own a macro lens, and I figured since I don't do a lot of macro photography, I'll hold on to this and get an adapter or something. It turned out that it was not a very expensive lens, and something happened with its autofocus where on the Nikon, like it wouldn't quite hit exactly, and so I didn't really feel good about selling it to somebody who would be using that. So I was like, okay, I can hold on to this. I'll look into getting an inexpensive adapter. And so the one that I ended up with is this Photodiox Pro. It's basically a Nikon G mount to Fuji X mount adapter. And what that means is, because, of course, the camera companies, they make the actual hardware mounts separate from each other. And so, you can't just take a Nikon lens and stick it onto a Fuji. So you need something that's going to bridge that gap, which is great, but it introduces a couple of things. One, it does not do the autofocus. And so by definition now, this is a manual focus lens, even though it has autofocus mechanics in it and software in it, it can't talk to my Fuji. Plus, you also have issues of it's introducing space and distance between the lens and your sensor, and so it has to compensate for that. And then there's also the issue of some of these will let you change the aperture a little bit, but in the case of this lens, when I take any picture of it, there's nothing in the lens that's talking to the camera to pass along things such as aperture. So all the images that I shoot with this say that the aperture is 0, which is wide open.
That's pretty fast, yeah.
It's a super fast lens. And so, there are trade-offs, but it also means that rather than me going and spending several $100s for a macro lens made by Fuji, which I would consider doing if I was doing more macro type photography. But now I spent like maybe $60 for this adapter. And this particular adapter is actually like the Photo Diox Pro, which means that it has a little bit of aperture control on the mount itself. You can spend less and get some that really are designed just to make the two pieces connect.
One thing to bear in mind, your photos don't say what the aperture was. It doesn't say what the shutter speed was. It doesn't say what lens it was. It doesn't have any EXIF data at all. It'll have the name of the camera, but that's about it. But one of the problems is that if you're shooting a lens that's, say, very wide, you won't be able to benefit from the correction of lens distortion in software unless you can specify in the software. Maybe you can in Lightroom apply this lens profile to this photo because I know it was shot with this lens. When you're doing it with EXIF data in the lens, any app that can do that sort of distortion correction will do it automatically. And by the way, Apple's Photos app does distortion correction as well. They just don't tell you about it. You'll find that if you have a lens, if you were to compare a photo uncorrected in Lightroom or another app and compare it in the Photos app, you'll see that the Photos app is already corrected. You don't have the option to uncorrect it. And this correction is distortion, but it's also vignetting. It's also chromatic aberration. So it can make a big difference. And basically, what's happening is that your third-party lens may give you substandard performance, but a lot of the lenses you can get like this, I mean, your macro lens is a special case because you had it was broken, etc. You can get lenses that are less than $50, the Chinese brands. And a lot of Fuji people that I see in forums seem to like these lenses. I tried one and it was crap and I sent it back to Amazon. But my thought is I've got a 23 or a 35 millimeter lens, right, for my camera. And I wanted to try another one, just one of these cheap ones to see what it was like. If I've already got the lens, the only reason to buy a cheap one is because I can't afford the better one. I'd rather spend a little bit of money on the better one and have all of the things that go with autofocus, EXIF data, lens correction, etc., than just be cheap and have a cheap lens because the people you hang out with on forums like the cheap lens and it's hip to have the cheap lens. It's because sometimes it feels like that.
Yeah. Sometimes it does. Well, I think, at least for me, there have been a few times when I've been tempted to, again, get a less expensive lens that mostly like for me, like right now, I don't have any lenses that are faster than f2.8. Which,
but do you need lenses faster than f2.8?
Well,
you probably have some f2s, don't you?
I actually don't have any f2s right now.
You don't have any of the Fuji?
No.
What do they call those lenses? The Fujicrons?
The Fujicrons, yeah. No, I actually don't right now.
Okay.
And I've been sorely tempted, but what you just asked me was sort of the key thing where it's like, well, do you need that? Do you need a lens that is f1.4 or f1.8? And, there are certain times when it would be nice to have that.
Nah.
But, again...
You don't need it.
But do I need to go and spend $600, $800, $1,000 for it?
Exactly.
Maybe not.
That's the thing.
So
the Fuji, what we call the Fujicrons, or what they call the Fujicrons, they're making a neologism combined with Fuji and Summicron, which is a series of Leica lenses, the more affordable Leica lenses. And you've got the 16, 23, 35, and 50 millimeter lenses. The 16 is very recent. It's a 2.8, and the other three are f2. They're very small. They're very light. They're really affordable as lenses go. They're a few $100s or a few £100, but that's not a lot for the quality of the lenses that you get. If you want to buy an f1.4 or whatever of the 23 or 35, it's going to cost twice as much, if not more. It's going to weigh twice as much. It's twice as big. Mm-hmm. Now, you may actually need this for some things, but I mean, pump up the ISO. If you just need an extra stop, just use the ISO. You don't necessarily need that background blur.
Well, see, I've rented. So Fuji has a beautiful. It's a 56 millimeter f1.2, and I've rented that before and shot portraits with it, and it's a fantastic lens. It's $1,000, and I would imagine, for what you get, that is a pretty good deal. It's still $1,000. $1,000 that I don't currently have to spend on a lens. So that's why I've been tempted. Well, maybe I'll get one of these others that have a Fuji mount that is, a 1.4 lens that's only going to be like $300 or $400. And so you do that calculation, and part of the calculation is, okay, is it going to be as high quality as you want? Probably not, but could it be, good enough? Possibly. But then again, it's going to be a manual focus lens. Part of that is due to Fuji. Fuji traditionally, they have not opened up their specs for doing autofocus to third parties because...
But in an interview today on DP Review, they said that they have. This is news.
That they have, or they are about to?
That they have. There are already some lenses announced from Tokina that will offer autofocus, although the article on DP Review says that this detail is missing in the press release. But it says this means that Fujifilm is making its mount protocols available for licensing from third parties, which theoretically opens up the possibility of compatible optics from the likes of Sigma and Tamron at some point in the future. Yeah.
So it's something that's currently happening. There's nothing you can buy right now from a third party that would take advantage of this. So this is all stuff that's coming up, which is great.
Are you in a hurry?
I'm not in a hurry, no.
I think these days we can wait for a new lens.
Yeah. But, like up until now, that hasn't really been an option. So if you want a really inexpensive lens with a faster aperture, you would have to go for something that was manual focus.
Right, but the quality is going to be lower in many cases.
But the quality is going to be lower. So, as we've talked about before with photography, like there's all sorts of different trade-offs. Maybe the lower quality either is, as you said, sort of more of a vintage look that you're looking for, or, you just don't have the money to go all out, but you want to experiment with this stuff. And so that's great.
One other example is a lens baby lens. I bought one of these last year, the thing where when you focus tight, it gets all frosty and blurry. And I really haven't explored it that much, but it is definitely a manual focus lens. You have no choice. These are actually hard to focus because you need to focus with your aperture closed down a bit because otherwise it's too blurry to see. But then you open your aperture and it's blurry and you don't know where your focus point is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that veers more into the now you're going to do something that's more creative, and because these cameras are computers and they are really designed to look at a scene and try to make the best picture from it. And so when you start using things that aren't what the camera expects, it's going to involve more work, but that is under the assumption that, you're there to do that work. Like you want to deal with those limitations and you're being creative or you're looking for some other different look rather than just accurately recording what's in front of you.
Okay. Let's talk about your book.
Let's talk about your book. Let's take a break.
Oh, let's take a break and put our music on that we put on when we have sponsors, and we don't have sponsors because, to be quite honest, we've been kind of busy and we haven't had time to look for sponsors. So if you want to sponsor the Photoactive podcast, drop us a line. Okay, Jeff, you gave birth to a new book recently, 258 pages, The Photographer's Guide to Luminar 4. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's funny. You and I have written many books in our careers, and there are some books that are, that are great. There are some books that are sort of more, what's a good term? Like workmanlike,
Yeah. You churn them out.
Yeah. It's a good experience. But it pays the bills, whatever. And then there are some books that either were very difficult or they just sort of mean something special. And for me, this is one of those books. And I know, oh, wait a minute, he has a brand new book out. Of course it's something special because I want everybody to buy my book,
Yeah, but I know what you mean. I've written several dozen books, both in print and ebooks. And sometimes you're just glad to get it over with. And sometimes you feel that you've really accomplished something.
Yes, exactly. And so, especially with this book, this is a book, I almost don't even want to say this because it's embarrassing. When I signed the contract to do this book, it was 2 years ago, looking at, I think, Luminar 2018. They hadn't even released Luminar 3 yet. And, as book projects go, it was going to be done, in X number of months and out in the market, whatever. And yet this was a project that, for, various reasons over that time, got kicked back or got, things unexpectedly changed. I mean, I don't know. I apologize to our listeners who are like, I don't really care about writing books, but one of the interesting things about this project was just the timing of it turned out. For example, so I did this with Rocky Nook. Our friends at Rocky Nook published this, and I had written a fairly sizable chunk of the book that covered Luminar 3. And Luminar 3 in the previous edition or previous version had been, pretty consistent, and they were just adding new features. And so we had a schedule where the book was going to come out, I want to say November of 2019. And so, I was like, aggressive. We're going to hit these deadlines. This is going to happen. And then we found out from Skylum. Because fortunately, Rocky Nook and Skylum, they basically signed a deal to sort of say, okay, we're going to communicate. Found out from Skylum, they're like, hey, you guys know that Luminar 4 is coming, right? And we're like, no, tell us more. And so it turned out that Luminar 4 is quite a bit different than Luminar 3. And that basically...
So let me just jump in.
Yeah,
if
please.
You do have Luminar 3... definitely look to the update. We'll have a link in the show notes to an episode we did about Luminar 4.
Yeah.
It is quite different, and even though I don't use the app, the AI stuff and all of the new tools really make a huge difference. So if you are using the older version, spend the money and get the upgrade and get the book.
Yes, definitely. It's one of those things where I was actually sort of trepidatious about the new version, not only because I had to, basically revamp a whole lot of work that I had done. I had to throw out a lot of what I had already written, reshuffle things. But, that's all kind of inside baseball. The important part of this is actually what I like about Luminar 4 is they cleaned it up a lot. So Luminar 3 had this system where you had workspaces and you had all the tools were different filters and you could mix and match things, and it was like super flexible, but it was also really complicated. And Luminar 4, I think they did a really good job of going in and saying, okay, this is just a layer of complication that people don't need, especially people who are not accomplished or experienced photo editors, because they want to appeal to people who don't do a lot of photo editing. They want to appeal to people who are learning this. And so Luminar 4, it's now just a lot cleaner. The new AI stuff that they put a lot of work into has some really impressive capabilities that it can do. I'll put a link in the show notes. I did a webinar with Rocky Nook and demonstrated a few of the AI things, and that's available now for a replay. I'll put that in the show notes just to see what it does.
Okay, it's worth pointing out that this book is full of photos of your wife and daughter in coffee cups.
What?
So people who know you will not be surprised seeing some of the photos. And actually, there's a few photos in here that we've already seen in show notes for the podcast. Do you mention the podcast in the book, Jeff?
Yes, I'm sure I do.
Good. Okay. And also, we're going to have a couple of copies that we're going to give away to subscribers to our mailing list. So if you go to photoactive.co, that's photoactive.co, and sign up for our mailing list, you might win a copy of the book. If you're already signed up, don't worry, you'll be entered in the drawing. The drawing is Jeff asking Siri for random numbers based on the number of people in the mailing list, and maybe you'll win a copy of the book.
Yeah. Oh, I should also point out that right now the ebook is available. You can purchase that and buy it now. You can get it from Amazon. You can get it from Apple Books, the Apple Bookstore, and there's also you can get it from Rocky Nook directly. If you get it from Rocky Nook directly and you use the code Carlson40, CARLSON 40, then you get 40% off.
Dude,
I know.
That's a great deal.
I know. And so that's for the ebook. The print book is still forthcoming. It's being printed, and I believe it's being printed overseas in Korea, I think. So the print version is not going to arrive. I think the last estimate that I heard was June. So it takes a lot of work to assemble bits into pages and ink.
It does.
And ship it and distribute it. And I honestly have no idea how that's going to be affected by coronavirus and everything like that. But the ebook is available now. It looks great. I'm going to just sort of say this because when I write books, I do all the layout. And so I just want to put out, I put a lot of work into trying to make these images look good and be clear and understandable. There are a couple of chapters that are just specifically walkthroughs. So I take a photo and just explain everything that I've done rather than sort of a typical approach that it's just like, well, okay, here's a tool and here's how it works. Like that stuff's in there too, but I also wanted to have like some very specific, okay, here's a picture of, a man's portrait and it's underexposed. What are we going to do with it? And it steps through that. Okay.
So everyone, Photographer's Guide to Luminar 4, buy it so Jeff can afford to put food on his table.
Yes.
We all depend on this. Time for our snapshots?
Let's do snapshots.
Have you got a snapshot this week?
I do. Do you have a snapshot?
I.
Excellent.
I do. Okay. This is great. We're doing good this week. We're laughing because sometimes we come and we don't necessarily have snapshots, or I don't necessarily have a snapshot. Jeff really generally does plan a little bit better than me, but go ahead.
Well, I plan a couple minutes before we get on our Skype call.
Right.
So my snapshot is actually sort of general. I will find a good link to put in the show notes. But basically, one of the things that I did this week as part of another book project, I needed to do a little bit of product photography. And so I could have set up a big, setup in my house, and I just didn't really have the time or the desire. And so I basically took the reflector that I mentioned in a previous episode that has a black back on it. And I used that as a background. And I needed something to hold it up because I do not have assistants. And so basically what my snapshot is that you can get light stands. And I have a pair of light stands. But you can also get basically little boom arms that connect to the light stands. And the one that I have, it came in a kit that had 2 light stands and this boom arm. And it's got like clamps and things on it. And basically, it's just this great way of holding up kind of anything you want to have draped behind something. So in this case, literally, it's just this little cross piece that screws into all the little, knobs and things that you can put on a light stand, and just holds things in place. I find it's been very useful. They're not very expensive, and actually at Amazon you can buy, these sets. You can spend a lot of money on this sort of thing if you want, but I think for less than $100 you can get a set of light stands and just accessories that can get you started, definitely. Kirk, Mr. Prepared, what do you have this week?
I'm prepared. In the last episode, I picked a recent book by Alex Soth called I Know How Furiously Your Heart is Beating. And last week, I follow the Martin Parr Foundation on Twitter, and they published an interview with Alex Soth. It's about 20 minutes, Martin Parr sitting on a sofa with Alex Soth. It's called Sofa Sessions. In fact, I'll link in the show notes, and you can go through and see some of the other sofa sessions that they have with other photographers. The reason I think this is interesting is it's very brief, and Alex is talking a bit about his career, and he studied photography, and he had these jobs working in museums and photographer in the art world, which sounds a bit pretentious, right? But then for the last 6 or 7 or 8 minutes, he's talking about his process of portrait photography. And if you remember when I was talking about this book in the last episode, I said how moving I found these portraits, that they were very, very different from the normal portraits. And he talked about how he'd slowed down, he's a different approach to getting to know people in taking their pictures. And if you take portraits and you just go up to people, say, hey, can I take your picture? Click and walk away. I think it's interesting to listen to someone who's been doing this for a while, and to hear what he's saying about the fact. He talks about how he doesn't want to sort of intrude, so he wants to converse with people, get to know them before he takes pictures. And I find it really interesting. It's really short. It's just a few minutes, but there's enough in there to make it worth thinking about when you take portraits as well.
That sounds great.
Okay, well then that's it for today.
I don't have anything more to say.
We're a little bit out of sync today, I think, because both of us have been working a lot lately. I've been doing a lot of podcasting, and you've been, birthing books and all that.
Yes.
So I guess that's it. Until next episode, take care.
Until next episode, bye.
Thanks for listening to Photoactive. You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in this episode, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. We couldn't afford the M. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/photoactivecast. That's photoactivecast in one word. You can subscribe to Photoactive in your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts. See the links on our website. And think about leaving us a rating or review in iTunes or in your podcast.